Hey, good people. It's Davin. I'm back for another episode of the Free Your Voice, Free Your Life podcast. I don't know why I do this. I don't know why I keep doing this, but I'm about to go somewhere. Tomorrow, I'm going to get on an airplane. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And for whatever reason, it's right before I'm supposed to travel that I have the clarity to lock in a podcast episode. And for whatever reason, I'm willing to make the time to do that. So here we are again. I'm on the precipice of getting on an airplane. You'll never believe if I tell you where I'm headed and what I'm going to do. So I'm going to tell you. You ready? This would not be on your bingo card, but I'm headed to Lisbon, Portugal, which I'm so excited about. I've never been before. It's going to be amazing just to be in that city. But I'm going there to bring Voxus, my improvisational singing experience that I bring to corporate groups. If you want to know more about that, it's voxusexperience.com, VOXUS. But I'm bringing Voxus to employees of the WD-40 company. I'm going to Lisbon to get WD-40 employees to sing together. I mean, that's silly, right? But kind of amazing and delightful and wonderful. And this is life. Like, life takes us in totally unexpected, strange, weird, funny, joyful places, and this is one of them for me. And I'm just really grateful and excited to report back to you about this experience, what it's like, how they receive this. But if you've been following along in previous episodes, you've heard I've been doing this amongst some really unexpected groups, and it's all gone swimmingly. And I have just this profound confidence in the human desire to connect through singing. And so I'll go anywhere. I'll go to the most unexpected group of people, and I will do what it is that we do with improvisational singing, and we'll make it up, and we'll use our voices together, and it's gonna be awesome. People are gonna be smiling, they're gonna be laughing, they're gonna be dancing, and they're gonna just feel like more human, and that's what I really care about. Reconnecting people with themselves and each other, and as a result, bringing them into deeper connection with themselves and each other. Um, so I'm doing that, and then I'm coming back, and then my partner and I, Scott and I, are going to be going on a sort of extended vacation in the UK, which I'm really so happy. We need a vacay, y'all. Can you relate to that? We need a vacation, and we're going to do it. And then when we get back the next day, it gets kookier. I'm going to be leading 5,000 neuroscientists in improvisational singing. 5,000 neuroscientists. Now, they don't know this, but they're going to be singing. And yeah, I'm going to report back to you on all of this stuff upon my return. But this is the funny, kooky, joyful, delightful, surprising nature of my life right now. And I'm grateful. I'm super, super grateful. And I think since last time we connected, I also I was in Denver. I brought the Reset, my immersive sound healing experience, the resetsoundexperience.com. I brought that to the Denver concert hall, the Betcher Concert Hall in Denver, part of the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And that was so good. It felt so good, y'all. Like, so much open-heartedness in that place, in that space, and they've never done any sort of programming like that before, and people turned up, and they brought their pillows and their eye masks, and they come, and they laid down on the stage, and yeah, I felt really in my body, I felt really in my voice, I felt really in deep connection with spirit and deep connection with the people there, and it was powerful, and I'm so grateful. And on October 28th, if you're in or around Washington, D.C., or you know other people that are, I'm going to be bringing this to the Kennedy Center. I'm going to be doing that immersive sound healing experience at the Kennedy Center, and I'm stoked and I'm kind of nervous. But I think it's going to be really good. And so you can learn more at the Reset Sound Experience. You can find links to tickets at the resetsoundexperience.com. That's the news you can use from what I've been out in the world doing. But today I want to bring you an episode that I've been talking about and promising. I've mentioned it in previous episodes a lot, and I apologize. I don't like to be the person that says I'm going to do something and then not do it. But I recognize that I haven't really been ready to do it until now. And it's because it feels like a pretty significant undertaking. I'll just cut to the chase. This episode is going to be about my path utilizing meditation in my own life, and maybe how it relates to my own singing, but how meditation might be a good path of pursuit in your own life. But particularly if you want to pursue singing, creative practices, um, finding authenticity and freedom in your voice. Now, I want to be clear to begin with that this episode is not meant to evangelize meditation or proselytize you. If meditation isn't your gig right now, cool. No pressure, no problem. It's not for everyone. Um, I'm cool with that. That's why I really want to bring this to you through the lens of my experience because I don't think that one should engage practices that they don't necessarily feel some level of calling to. Do you know that story or that phrase that gets thrown around? It's like when the student is ready, the teacher will become present or they'll find the teacher. And I think that a lot about various contemplative, spiritual, meditative practices. It's like if it doesn't feel good right now or if it doesn't feel necessary, don't do it. Don't do it. Keep pursuing, keep looking, keep exploring. But that being said, there is a history throughout time, throughout thousands of years, of people who want to pursue personal growth, healing, and transformation, utilizing meditation as a significant part of that journey. And I have to tell you that meditation is something that I would credit as being the singular most important practice that I have in my life. I actually would even go so far as to say that meditation is more fundamental to me, more important to me than singing itself. Because, and I'll share more about this later, I don't believe that I would be the singer or the voice user that I am without having engaged my meditation practice for the time that I have. I believe that meditation is sort of the precursor to everything that I love and love to do. But let me tell you a little bit about the origin story of meditation in my life. Go back with me, if you will, to 2014. This is a significant year in my life in so many ways, shapes, and forms. I don't know why exactly what was happening, but in 2014, I was 33 years old and I made some really significant shifts and moves. This is when I went to become a full time voice teacher. This is when I left my full time job and went out on my own and started to pursue what I can best describe as a more expansive life. And I think one of the things that happened during that time when it was very literally June of 2014 that I left my full-time job. One of the things that I remember right away when I did that is this feeling of spaciousness, this feeling of time, this feeling of openness. I think often about some of the first breakfasts that I ate when I wasn't going to my 9 to 5 and how I had sort of this feeling of leisure that I was able to engage while eating breakfast. And the reason I tell that to you is I think so many of us move throughout our lives feeling like time is being constricted or is so limited and so stuck, and we feel like we're constantly chasing more of it. And I remember in that moment, and it wasn't just about the job, but it was something about this spirit, this shift that was happening within me. I remember in that moment feeling spacious. And I remember wanting to pursue practices during that time that felt like they would really feel good in the midst of that spaciousness. And so I started to pursue learning more about meditation and yoga during this time. And meditation, this is the part that I'm a little bit embarrassed to share, but the way in which I uncovered my first practices was through the woman herself, Oprah Winfrey. Oprah was doing a partnership with Deepak Chopra, and somehow I caught wind of this and got on a mailing list. And they did this 30-day meditation challenge, and it was transcendental meditation specifically, where every day they would send you a phrase or a mantra that you would be able to utilize and repeat through your practice. And there were some pretty good, simple instructions around what it would mean to pursue meditation. And so I decided to engage in the challenge. And I remember even thinking to myself, like, I remember observing in my apartment, where did I want to sit? what would be the right place to sit in meditation? And I tried on all these different spots for size and you name it. But for whatever reason, at this moment in time, that challenge, those 30 days, I did it. And trust me, I have a history of engaging 30-day challenges that I haven't completed. But for whatever reason, that one stuck. And I sat every day and I utilized the phrases that they sent to me. And I remember right away feeling like this was important. It felt really good and it felt like a big deal and it felt like I needed to do it. And when the 30 days was up, I felt like I needed to keep doing it. And so I kept doing sort of what they had said and just started to repeat things. But then this hunger welled up within me where I wanted to know more. See, I grew up in an evangelical Protestant Christian tradition. And so spiritual practices are something that I've spent my whole childhood and teen years and young adult years practicing and cultivating with a lot of inner turmoil and tension along the way. But something like prayer, for instance, is something that I felt quite acquainted with from a very young age. But there was something about these meditation practices that felt very different. They felt like they created, I'm going to use this word a lot today, but a spaciousness or an expansiveness within my life that I had never experienced before. And so I started to research. I started to try to learn more about these Eastern practices. And I found that there was a whole sort of Western, modern contemporary Western trajectory and history of how these practices had been popularized in the West and some of the teachers that had brought them there. And I started to learn particularly about this group of people who during the 1960s and 70s went to India, went to Thailand, went east, and learned about these practices, studied with teachers, found gurus, and came back and brought them to the US and started to build a following around learning that. Some of these folks, the names that you may not know, but I'll drop them here because maybe you'll want to research them yourself, but that were influential for me early on and have continued to be so, were Sharon Salzberg and Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Daniel Goleman and John Kabat-Zinn. These are some names that you might want to look up. But also then that led me into learning more about the various different traditions and practices around mindfulness and meditation, and particularly Buddhism. And I became acquainted with Thich Nhat Hanh, of whom you might be familiar with, and Pema Chodron, and Tara Brach, and you name it. There are a lot of people that I could name drop and just tell you that I've read, that I started to read. And I got sucked down this rabbit hole of pursuing learning around particularly Buddhist meditation practices. I almost became obsessed. This is what happens to me. I get really interested in something, and then I'm listening to every podcast and reading every book. And I became just sort of fascinated with the idea that these practices could be so influential in my life. Now, let me tell you what I learned quickly that meditation is and what it isn't. And I offer this to you right away because it might dispel some of what you have learned or believed and why you might have felt resistant, if you have in the past, to pursuing some of these practices. So, a lot of people believe or think that meditation is about stopping thinking or clearing your mind. And while it's easy to interpret aspects of meditation in that way, it's not true. The truth is that meditation is about changing your relationship to your thoughts by cultivating awareness, by cultivating attention and awareness around the fact that you are thinking. That sounds so funny because, of course, you're thinking, but we forget that we're thinking. And when we forget that we're thinking, we tend to believe that everything we're thinking is true. And we'll put a pin in that. But spoiler alert, everything you think isn't true. Some of it might be, but a lot of it isn't. But meditation is about cultivating awareness and attention so that you can change your relationship, or not even change, but choose your relationship to your thoughts and your thinking. This was a huge light bulb for me because I thought at best in the past that I had to escape the bad thoughts or be saved from them. That was much of the narrative that I was given. And my relationship to prayer was often around trying to escape the discomfort of my life. Now, one of the other really transformative truths that I learned early on, particularly around the study of Buddhism, was that suffering exists and that we all suffer. That word suffering can feel dramatic if you're just encountering it for the first time. The Pali word in the Buddhist text is dukkha, and it's often translated into suffering, but it also could just be unsatisfactoriness. That to be a human is to experience unsatisfactoriness, that we all suffer, that we all have shit in our lives, that we all itch sometimes. And that we all have emotions and feel affected by the ways of the world and that bad things happen. I don't know how to describe this, but this was such a monumental shift in perspective for me because just to be able to be honest that I suffered was not something up until that point in my life that I felt really comfortable doing. And it all started with just being able to be honest with myself that I was uncomfortable, that I wasn't happy sometimes, that I was sad sometimes, that I was frustrated, that I was annoyed, that things hadn't worked out how I wanted them to work out, and how there was a lot of discomfort within my being around that, that relationships had been faulty and that, there had been disappointment and sadness and sorrow. It was just such a relief to be able to own that for myself that, yeah, it sucks sometimes. And part of the meditative practice is to learn how to sit with that reality because in the Buddhist tradition, there's a belief that as much as suffering exists, there is also an end to suffering, that suffering is not a permanent state. Now, I'm going to give you a quick crash course here too, and I'm not going to be able to have time to dig into this fully. But it's also taught in the Buddhist tradition that suffering is caused by clinging to what was or grasping at something other than what is. Clinging to what was or grasping at what isn't, what you want to be. It's this staring the current situation in the face and going, I see you, I see you, I see you, I see you. Now, this started with me and Oprah and Deepak, it started with just allowing myself to cultivate attention, awareness through repeating these phrases. But a lot of meditation practices, a lot of traditions start with simply noticing your breath, breathing and know that you're breathing. And what happens when you do that is you immediately develop a more intimate relationship with yourself. And one of the things that you'll notice quickly is that when you try to pay attention to your breath, you'll notice that your mind wanders, that thinking happens. And if you follow the path of thinking, you'll find yourself down some pretty interesting places. Sometimes you'll find yourself down catastrophizing. Sometimes you'll find yourself down the path of fantasy. None of that's right or wrong, but the question is that where you want to go? And if you've sat down with the intention of noticing your breath, this is part of the practice. You see, oh, I'm thinking, and you get to come back to your breath. And you go, oh, I'm thinking again. And you get to come back to your breath. And it's not comfortable and it's not easy. And at first, you don't have to do it for a long time at all. You could just do it for a couple breaths, to be honest. But it's really powerful because it starts to change your relationship to your thoughts. Because as I said, it turns out that not everything you say, not everything you think, not everything you believe is true. Now, I know that's disappointing because your ego wants desperately for it all to be true, but it ain't. And that's good news because if everything you thought was true, life would be even more difficult, I fear. Because if everything I thought was true, uh, I've thought some crazy things in my day. I've also thought some amazing things, but it's really about understanding how I want to relate to my thoughts. Okay, now let me put a little pin in this here and come back in a moment. But I wanted to say that this time in my life where I was cultivating these practices, changing my relationship to my thoughts and my thinking, it happened to correspond with a period of my life where I was also doing some deep transformative work with my own voice. This is a time in my life where I was engaging the teachings of Jeannie Levetri. I was exploring somatic voice work, and I was really trying to change my relationship to my voice as an instrument. I was trying to cultivate change within the coordination of my body. I was trying to make new sounds. I was trying to open up to something that felt more free and more easy. And one of the things that I noticed right away, very simply put, was that in order to do this well, I had to be able to notice my body. I had to be able to notice my breath. I had to be able to cultivate an awareness of my mouth, of my posture, of my throat, of my face, of my jaw, of my lips, and my tongue. And it was hard because a lot of that awareness, I struggled to keep my attention on it, first and foremost. But then also, when I would find my ability to focus on it, I was often disappointed with what I encountered. It felt difficult to look myself square in the face and see the ways in which I was struggling because I didn't want to struggle. I wanted to be a good singer. I wanted to be successful. I didn't want to be someone who suffered. I didn't want to have an unsatisfactory voice. But it turns out that I had to be able to sit with, I'm going to use this word, it sounds dramatic, but the suffering of my singing in order to find my way into the freedom of my voice. And as I started to observe this within myself, I noticed that this wasn't just true for me, it was true for everyone that I was working with. That the people who had developed the capacity or had the capacity, cultivated the capacity, or maybe, had lived a life that pointed them toward having this capacity, if they had the capacity to stay with themselves, to stay with their body, to notice their breath, to not engage a story of catastrophe, when they were able to do that, they could make changes more quickly and they enjoyed the process more. It turns out that working on one's voice was a meditation in and of itself. It was the cultivating of attention. It was the questioning of the stories that came up around the noticing. And in this case, it was coming back to the voice, which is of course inspired by the breath. Do you see this correlation here? That a beginning meditation practice often starts with the noticing of one's breath. And it turns out that in order to sing, you have to breathe. And so if you notice your breath, the next thing you can notice is your body. And if you notice your body and you want to sing, the next thing you can notice is your voice. And there might be a lot of disappointment there. There might be a lot of frustration. But as the Buddha told us, that's not specific to you. That's actually true for all of us. That's good news. You're not alone in this endeavor. I too am frustrated. I too suffer. I too get annoyed. I too fail. I too falter. I too have sorrow. But that's not the end of the story because remember, the Buddha also taught that there's an end to suffering. There's an end to suffering. And it turns out that that end begins by the simple noticing of your suffering, the noticing of your unsatisfactoriness. You may have heard me say before on this podcast, people come to voice coaching because they want change. They want something different. You in your life right now might want something different. You might want things to shift and change and grow and move and expand and transform. I know I do. That's a constant part of my experience. But that want and that desire, that's just the marble that gets rolling. From there, it's really important to be able to see the situation clearly, to be able to sit with the totality of your experience. And this is what the practice of meditation offers. It offers the opportunity to expand your ability to see your situation clearly. And when you do, It might stir up some shit, but that's when you get the opportunity to ask yourself, is this thought, is this story true? And if it's not true, how do I want to relate to it? Or if it is true, how do I want to relate to it? One of the things that happens for a lot of us, myself included, is that when you start to sit in meditation, stuff comes up. The stuff that you've been ignoring, suppressing, pushing back, pushing down, it doesn't stay there. It comes up. And that's a harsh reality. And that can feel like too much. And again, I want to just say that if it does feel like too much, don't feel like you have to stay there. You might need other modalities, other support. Don't engage this practice unless you feel called to, because it will transform you. But if you don't feel called, but you want to start to do this work, you might do it through psychotherapy. You might do it through somatic practices. You might do it through coaching work. You might do it through yoga, you name it. Look for the modality, the path of healing that feels aligned with where you are in your life right now. But if you feel like you do have the capacity and the interest, and you start to sit and you start to notice your breath, and you notice that when you notice your breath, you start thinking. And sometimes when you start thinking, it gets really crazy. It gets really wild. It's not simply a to-do list. It can be a whole story, a whole narrative about how someone hates you, or how you're bad at this, or how you look ugly, or you name it. Those stories, they absolutely come up in my mind all the time too. But what I have the capacity now to do over 10 years of sitting every day, with a few exceptions, but most every day, is I can see those stories and I can name them as a story. And when I name them as a story, it somehow defangs them. I don't then become the victim of the thought. I somehow embody a sort of neutrality around it. There's a word that gets utilized in Buddhist teachings a lot, and it's equanimity. Equanimity. I feel equanimity as it relates to the drama of my thinking. And the beauty of that is that then I get to be active in the choice. I don't just fall down the rabbit hole of thinking and thought, but I get to choose how it is that I want to relate to it. And this again is what I've noticed makes for one to be more successful more quickly in their path around transformation and healing, particularly as it relates to their voice. If we can let go of the stories, or if we can at least see the stories clearly, we can choose how it is that we want to relate to them. And we might not keep proliferating the narrative or the story that I'm bad at this, that I'm ugly, that I don't deserve this, that there's not enough for me, that this will never happen for me, that this is too late, you name it. And you start to go, is that true? I don't think that's true. And if that's not true, what do I want to do? How do I want to be? How is it that I want to relate to myself? How is it that I want to relate to others? There's this other concept or word that gets utilized a lot in um, Buddhist meditation practices, and it's compassion. Compassion is one of the most widely taught aspects of Buddhist mindful teaching. And there's a reason for that. Because when we have the capacity to sit and notice our thinking, our thoughts, the stories, the challenges, the suffering of our lives, our heart's natural urge is to, I always love this word, to quiver in response to that. Now, you probably know this as you've seen others. If you imagine you're sitting with someone else and they start to tell you how much they suck, how terrible they are, how bad they are at this, how this will never happen for them. Your heart quivers at hearing that because you know what it is to feel that way. You know what it is to suffer. You know what it is to struggle. You know what it is to talk down to yourself. And so you say to them, that's not true. You don't know. You have no idea. There's so much possible for you that maybe you can't see right now. And if you can just step outside this story, if you could just step outside this thinking long enough, you might catch a broader perspective of yourself. That broadness, that spaciousness, it has so much worth and value in our lives because it's at the heart of why we feel so limited so often, why we feel so constricted so often is because we get caught in the smallness of our thoughts and our stories. And when we engage practices like contemplative practices and meditative practices, we start to be able to put room or spaciousness around the thoughts. And we go, I don't know if that's true. And then we can suddenly breathe more deeply into the possibility, the realm of possibility. We start to catch a bigger glimpse of who we might be and what's possible for us. And we start to reconsider how it is that we're relating to ourselves. And as a result, we then reconsider how it is that we want to relate to others. We develop a deeper connection, a deeper bond to ourselves. And as a result, we fall into the natural mode of compassion and we start to go, buddy, you're doing great. I know this is hard. You're doing so well. And when I did this, when I experienced this in my own life, it was like lights just started to turn on left and right. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat this. When I first started to sit with the truth of my experience and my feeling, it almost was like everything got worse. It was almost like everything got worse because I finally let myself feel and notice the things that I had been suppressing or repressing. Remember, my upbringing, there was a story about prayer, and I had misunderstood, I know now, that prayer was the practice that I would do to engage, to escape from, or be saved from the bad experiences of my life. And meditation was my first venture into staying with the bad experiences of my life so as to find healing and transformation, to transmute them into the joy and the prosperity and the abundance and the delight that I experience so often in my life now. This often happens when people start singing and they start to work on their voice and they get really excited because they have this belief that they can create change, but when they start to get into the nitty-gritty of the ways in which they struggle, they get discouraged. It's almost like everything feels worse. It almost feels like everything's going downhill. But this is a part of the practice of being able to sit with the fullness of your experience. And it takes time. It takes repetition. It takes cultivation. And you don't generally start big, you start small. But you start to go, okay, there's some stuff here and I'm engaging it and I'm gonna sit with it. And in fact, if I'm really radical, I might even accept it exactly how it is. And as a result, I might be able to move through it. I might be able to move beyond it. I might be able to make new sounds, but I've got to get to know why I'm making these sounds first. I often think about one of the fundamental principles around healing from alcoholism or any sort of drug addiction, and that the first step is admitting that you have a problem. This is true in all aspects of our life. The first step is admitting that you suffer, not ruminating in your suffering, not clinging to your suffering, but simply saying that it's true. And as a result, seeing if you have or can have or cultivate the capacity to stay with that as a truth. Not so as to proliferate it, but because there's this inherent understanding that when I say it's true, when I notice it, I also can't help but notice that it shifts and changes. When I resist it, when I cling to it, it feels stuck. It feels tighter. It feels constricted. But when I say it's true and I accept it and I allow it to be there, and I say to myself, sometimes I sing and I don't like the sound very much. Or if I say, I'm really disappointed that my life has gone this direction. Or I really see that I was given a bad hand in this regard, that I was treated poorly. When I allow myself to confront those realities head on, and I start to really investigate them, I can change my relationship to them and I can recognize that they're not the totality of my experience, not the totality of my story. Resistance is at the heart of your suffering. Clinging, grasping, resistance is at the heart of your suffering. It turns out in the voice, constriction is the enemy of the voice. That sounds kind of similar, doesn't it? You see why these two things are interrelated for me? Constriction, tightness, closing in, protection. This is the enemy of the voice. If resistance is at the heart of your suffering, what is the opposite of resistance? Letting go, allowing, receiving, being open hearted. It turns out that the opposite of constriction is also those things: allowing, opening up, expanding, freedom, liberation, neutrality, equanimity. It's really powerful stuff. Meditation is the singular most influential practice I have in my life. I really credit so much of my growth as a human being to the fact that for whatever reason, I've been able to maintain a daily meditation practice. And I've had seasons where it's been a real struggle. It is not easy, y'all. It's the gym. It's like going to the gym. It can be really hard sometimes. And you know when it's its hardest is when I'm in a really bad situation, when I'm having interpersonal conflict or you name it. Whenever there's real struggle in my life, it's really hard to sit because I don't want to sit with those feelings. It's much easier to sit when things are going well. But because I've cut my teeth, because I've grown those muscles, because I have the expansive awareness, I'm able to sit. And when I do, I always feel better. I always feel better. Even if I sit with the suffering and it feels like a lot, on the other side of having sat with it, I feel more open. I feel like I can breathe more deeply. I feel more connected to the universe. I feel like I want to connect more deeply to others. And I always, 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 this is so true and uncanny and crazy, but I always feel gratitude. I always feel gratitude. It's pretty epic shit when you feel that. I've never completed a meditation practice without feeling gratitude at the end. So happy, so grateful, so appreciative. And singing is a meditation of the voice. It's a meditation on breathing, breath, the body, sound. It's a meditation on expanding. It's a meditation on honesty, authenticity. It's a meditation on suffering and struggle. It's a meditation on freedom and openness. It's a meditation on liberation. And you, my friend, have the capacity to do all of that and so much more. I want to encourage you to look up some of those names that I mentioned earlier. I think that Pema Chodron has a book called How to Meditate. Might be a great place to start. But I'd love for you to just do your own research. If you haven't been down this path before, just start to Google, see what you find. You're going to find a lot. There's a lot of different stuff, a lot of different schools of thought around these practices. None of them are right or wrong. It's whatever resonates with you. If it feels difficult, yeah, it's tricky at first. But I hope that if you hang out just long enough that you might feel similarly that this can really be the precursor to real transformation in your life. It could be the source. It can be just the moment of pause that points you down a different path than the one you've been thinking you're headed down. I'd like to end this episode with a meditation. What do you think about that? If you're, I'm going to keep this really simple and I'm going to keep it short. If you want to engage meditation with me further, there are two ways in which you can do it. One is through the Insight Timer app. You can just look up Davin Young's and you'll find a number of different practices, some of which are supported by sound that I've made or music that I've made. You can also join me every Sunday. I lead a beautiful, beautiful community of humans in a group called Sit Club that I created during the pandemic. It's been going for 4 years, almost every Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time. You can learn more about that at davinyoungs.com. Just click the link that says Sit Club, submit your email address. I'm happy to include you. It's a free gathering. It's truly one of the biggest highlights of my week. I love, love, love the community that gathers there. I'm so grateful. I'm so fed by that gathering. So those are a couple places in which you engage me in meditation practices and you can learn more. But now, just for a moment, let's end our time together with a really brief practice where wherever you are, if you're seated and if you're able, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes or anything. But if you're out for a walk, I just want you to allow yourself to breathe and know that you're breathing. And if you are seated and you're in a comfortable, safe place and you want to bring your attention inward by closing your eyes, go ahead and do that. But start by noticing that there's an inhale and there's an exhale. And that's followed by another inhale and another exhale. And notice that you're thinking and that your thoughts might lead you away from the breath. And that's okay. But when they do, that's an opportunity for you to just come back to breathing. And breathing's so amazing as a point of focus because it's not even something you have to do, it's just there. Just there all the time, reminding you that you're alive and that there's a rhythm to your life and that you're human. And that even though there are times where it feels like everything's overwhelming and too much, or that you won't get where it is that you want to go, even though those thoughts occur, your breath reminds you that you're okay. You're still here. You're still doing the thing that humans do, which is doing your best. And that when you come back to your breath and your breathing, there's the possibility of discovering a different type of ease. You might be even able to soften. And you might be able to set yourself up for a different relationship to the rest of your day, how it is that you want to move forward. What you believe or don't believe, how you interact with others, how you want to express yourself. You might deepen and cultivate your relationship to you. And that's one of the most precious opportunities you have on any given day, but particularly right now. Once again, notice your inhale and notice your exhale. And then release the practice. How do you feel? Does that change things for you? It does for me. All right, my friend. Big love. More soon. Peace.